I'm Mutz Meerman. My wife Judy Knox and I own a small company called Out on Bale Unlimited that is a resource for straw bale construction. I first heard about straw bale construction in the spring of 1988 when I read a little article in a permaculture newsletter that I get. It said that a young couple over in Gila, New Mexico had finished closing in a straw bale structure for about $5 a square foot. I couldn't believe the price, and I really couldn't believe that what they'd actually done was build a house out of stuccoed straw bales. I managed to track them down, and they invited me to come over and see their place, and it took me about 10 minutes to become convinced that it was certainly the way I wanted to eventually build myself a house to live in, and it was certainly a technique that I wanted to try to share with others. The history of straw bale construction appears to start in Nebraska in the late 1800s. The soils in the sandhills are so sandy that with only a few exceptions, sod is difficult to cut, and so the method of sod construction, which was often used by homesteaders in the Great Plains, was not as appropriate in the sandhills. They did have meadow hay, and someone hit on the idea of using the bales of meadow hay, stacking them up, putting a roof on them, and stuccoing them to protect them. And throughout the early 1900s, the technique was quite widely used in the sandhills of Nebraska. The bales used for straw bale construction are generally bales of the dry dead stems of cereal grains. In this country, that's typically wheat, oats, rice, barley, and rye. Buildings have been built, however, from baled tumbleweed, from baled Sudan grass, and we could probably utilize a number of different agricultural waste products as long as they could be baled into a good, dense, sturdy bale. There are two basic methods that have been used for straw bale construction. There's the historic Nebraska style, where a foundation was created, bales were stacked up, a roof plate, a wooden roof plate, was added to the top of the walls, and then the roof load was created on the load-bearing straw bale walls. A technique that has been developed and used in modern times is the post and beam technique, which means in general that some kind of vertical framework is created to carry the load of the roof, and the straw bales are simply used as infill, insulation, and something to attach the sheathing materials to. As the straw bale construction revival really started picking up speed in the late 80s, we felt we could really keep track of the situation. We felt that we knew about all the structures that were being built. By now, in June of 1993, we realize that we're lucky to hear about most of the structures after the fact, and we know that there are a lot of structures going up out there that we haven't heard about and that we may never hear about. Things are really taking off.
The idea of the interior was to have as much storage and efficient use of space as we could, so that it wouldn't have a cluttered look to it, and that it wouldn't seem teensy. So we actually put as much room out here in the area where we'd all hang out as we could, and then where we sleep is built like a boat. We decided not to have the partitions go all the way to the ceiling so that we would have adequate air movement in here. It's really all one big room, so if you have to sleep in the daytime or something like that, that's a problem. But the way we built in the bed, our feet can go down underneath the covers. And this was originally Eileen's room, my daughter, so she was in here when she was about 10 to 12. And she had a bed up here with cupboards and closet down below and a desk here. Steve's office. It's actually a mirror of the other room.
What I've done here is it's straw bales up to that level, to about the 9-foot level, and then I had framed to give myself a pitch in an attic crawl space so I could really insulate well. And then I have vents on each side to keep that captured hot air to get it out of my attic. And it's just a simple shed roof with 2x6 rafters and a 2x4 stuccoed frame on top.
We were pretty broke. It's probably the poorest we've been in a long time. We had just no reserves, so whatever we built had to be cheap. And we were exploring all sorts of ideas. And a neighbor of ours came down, mentioned straw bales. He had just read an article in Fine Home Building on a studio built out of straw. And he brought it down to us, and we looked at that, and that's sort of where the seed came from. And I think both our reaction was it was just crazy. And we just kept coming back to it as
cheap.
Cheap.
And we wanted really good insulation. We wanted, we didn't want to be oppressed by the heat. So.
All the fears of mice and so forth danced through our heads, but decided to go ahead with it. And that was 85, and 86 we started building. I had got the poles together and stuff and put the structure up, had the roof up first, had the bales stacked inside, which we trucked down from Berlin up towards Albuquerque, and started infilling our walls. My brother was down, and he and I laid the first bale, and I can still think of that as, it was funny, it must have taken us an hour to lay the first bale. Because I knew of no one else who had built with bales. All I had was that article, and so we were just trying to figure it out as we went.
The windows were heading for the dump, and
the door was in the dump.
Yeah.
That one I made.
We decided we had a sort of mystical relationship with the dump. If we sort of visualized what it was we needed, it seemed like it would either turn up at the dump or someone would tell us that someone was getting rid of it.
And so we worked about 8-9 days just getting all the mesh up. That's a real labor-intensive aspect of any kind of stuccoing, is getting the preparation for it.
We did have a work party when we were ready to do the first plastering coat, and we probably had 50 people here, little kids to old folks, and we had a big potluck. And the scratch coat doesn't need that much quality control. The kids could learn how to do it.
And we have a cement floor. It's fluoride poured just in sections, little frames, and kept moving the frames. So but it's our thermal mass. The super insulation with some mass and the right combination works really well. And ours seems to function about right, where it just kind of keeps a steady temperature in here.
We have somewhat less than like 470 square feet. Sometimes just making bread in the morning will be enough heat. We have a wood stove, and usually, unless it's been cloudy for a couple of days, we often don't need to make a fire in the morning. One aspect of this house that doesn't get talked about much is that it's soundproof. We have a kid who's a rock musician, and sometimes he has a little place on the property here, and sometimes our neighbors are being bothered by him when we don't even realize he's playing. So, I can't say that's an advantage. I'd like to know if he's bothering the neighbors, but...
Well, if I was to do anything different, the windows are the most inefficient part, and if I'd had the money, I would have put better windows in. Again, money driven, I would put more insulation in that ceiling. I have a R30 in there now, and I'd definitely go R40 and preferably R60. I'd have jacked that up some.
The actual cost of this in cash was something under $4,000, say $3,700, because we scrounged so many of the materials. I'm sure it'd be quite a bit more than that if we'd had to pay standard cost for the windows and that sort of thing.
Being an owner-builder and not counting your time makes a significant difference. That's 50, 60, 70% of what it costs to build that you've eliminated. But there's folks out there with the idea that I can build a place for $7.50 a square foot, like we did here.
But they want to hire out the labor.
Right.
I mean, they don't really have a clear idea of what it takes to build a house. And
that's about the only thing. I've always been looking for what is wrong, and after all these years, I've just really been thrilled by the place, how it functions, how the space works. I think we did real good. I just like the house. It came out well, and building of Bales is much more forgiving than I ever would have imagined. And my fears, the fears we had of water and rodents and bugs, and it was false fears. None of that materialized as a problem. And the straw is not the answer for everybody in every place, but it will make a significant contribution. I think it already is. It's definitely a wave of the future.
This is my herbal apothecary. I'm an herbalist and I have a wholesale tincture business. I sell medicinal plants to alternative docks and health food stores, particularly in the Southwest and West. This straw bale house really has worked out well for the medicinals because they need to be kept at kind of an even temperature, which I can do both summer and winter. And they don't want a whole lot of light, so there's no direct sunlight on this wall. And the dark walls kind of create a cave-like appearance in here. It does seem to be darker in here in the summer. And so it's worked out particularly well for the medicinals. So this room functions as my shop and mainly as my kitchen. It's not big enough, although I did sleep in here at one point, but since then I've renovated the adobe down a little bit closer to the river and I sleep down there. So what I'll do is I'll leave here at night, I'll go down and I'll open this all up, and then when I come back in the morning, it's cooled down considerably, and I'll shut the doors early in the morning, and it stays cool all day. These walls are simply a combination of mud and sand, and the mud was left over from the post holes that we dug outside the house. Now, this type of a finish is, it's fairly crumbly still. There are things you could do to harden it up. But this was to be my first coat. I was going to then coat it again and maybe finish it with something, but I liked it so well and I wanted to move in so much that I just moved everything in and never got any further than this. Steve had moved to this valley about a year before I had, and when I came down the road one day after I'd bought this property, I noticed somebody building a straw bale house. And so of course I had my heart set on a straw bale once I'd moved here, no matter what, and lo and behold, here's this man constructing one a mile and a half away. So I immediately stopped and talked to him about it, and asked him if he'd help me build it, and sure enough, we had them both done about the same time. And this house is constructed quite similarly to his. We went for the basic box. Yeah, it's post and beam because we really didn't know about the Nebraska style at that point. And it took us about 3 months to build it. There were 3 of us. And it was a little more of a hassle than the Nebraska style, I believe, because once you get to the top, you've got a lot of filling and cutting of bales to try and fit them into your roof line. And that takes a lot of time. It's a lot of trips up and down the ladder. Mm-hmm. So I would advocate Nebraska style when you can. I didn't build a tall enough footing. And I have had a little water wicking up from the ground. And even though we laid some tar paper down on the footing, a lot of people now are wrapping their first bale with tar paper also. And I think that's probably a pretty good idea. I'm not sure what square footage it would be, but this house cost anywhere from $7,000 to $10,000, and I did have help. And at one point, I had a big cement pour for the floor, and bought fairly expensive materials for the roof, and that's still cheap.
It is.
Yeah, it's great. So I look at it as a real bargain. I don't think you could even get a very big trailer for that kind of money. Maybe used. But more than any of that, there's just a feeling when you walk in about it's the textural. It feels alive. It feels organic. I think I'd really have a hard time living in any other form after this.
I got started through my association with Steve McDonald in the Gila Friends meeting, and straw bale sounded like such a wonderfully easy, fast way to build, and it appealed to me very much because it was from sort of the pioneering aspect also really appealed to me. This is bringing back some low-tech, interesting technology that was gentle on the earth. Straw bales are a resource that's renewable in one growing season and actually a waste product. So being able to turn them into shelter was a wonderful, very inspiring idea for me. I also liked the fact that straw bales are very light. I had watched Peter build his studio out of puddled adobe, or soil cement, which was a very heavy process, and I watched him sort of get thicker and stronger and his spirit sort of get heavier. And I realized that for building my studio, I wasn't going to be able to build it out of a material that heavy physically. And the straw bales were wonderfully light, and I knew that my women friends would want to help, and so it was a perfect material for us to work with. And in fact, a lot of the people who helped were women over 65, and they were so thrilled to be able to be there and be actually building, because all their lives they'd sort of been the auxiliary, and it just gave us all a great thrill to be the constructors, the construction workers for this building. So the ease of design with straw bale was also something that very much pleased me, because once you know the dimension of the bales, you simply sort of plot out the building from there. The one bale being the basic unit, and there's a few small rules. An opening can only be a bale and a half from a corner, and so forth and so on. So it was the design process was very, very easy once I figured out what size I wanted. This was the first Nebraska-style building to have been built out of Nebraska since the 20s. So, and the first building of any size. I guess Mott's had worked on a small bunkhouse, maybe 8 by 12, or really quite, no, I don't know, maybe a little bigger than that. But this building being basically 600 square feet, 20 by 36 outside dimensions, 17 by 32 inside dimensions. It was the first that had been done, and so we had, I don't know if it exists there innovations, but we had to be actually quite conservative in our construction techniques because it was the first to have been built. For the roof, we had designed it as a hip roof. So the hip roof was very easy to adapt to straw bale for a number of reasons. First of all, a hip roof bears the weight evenly on all 4 walls, whereas a gable roof would bear it on the roof, the 2 sides of it, and a hip roof will bear on all 4. And we had the trusses made commercially, thinking that there's an awful lot of angles to cut for at a work party. We didn't really want to leave that to the work party, and I was very glad we did it that way, because the lumber company actually, they didn't want to mess with using bad lumber for the trusses, so it was a deal. They sold us, they were very cheap, and they used better lumber than they sell at the yard to make the trusses, so we were very happy with that. So the work party, we had all the materials assembled. We had everything, as far as we knew, figured out in advance. Motts came, Professor Strawbale came and gave us a brief pep talk and set up the half bale making teams, and we started piling bales on the wall and fitting in the windows, and then the second day was involved with putting on the plate that holds the roof and putting up the roof trusses, and that was the second day. So at the end of the 2-day workshop party, we had the walls and the roof trusses on. And as far as I was concerned, the building was finished at that point. And then on Monday morning, I had this horrible realization that, oh my goodness, it wasn't in fact done. There was a lot more to do. But we got a good start, great start from the work party. The studio building party was in the beginning of October, and then we let it settle for a month, which it really actually didn't even settle very much. It settled 1/4 of an inch total, which was a real surprise to us. We thought it was going to settle a lot more. So after the roof was on, we let it settle for a month, and that got us into November, and we realized we had to work really fast to get the stucco on before it was too cold. And it turned out we had a very, very able crew of Mexican men come, and they did a masterful job. In terms of the cost of this building, I paid for a certain amount of labor because we had these other buildings that were going on, and it was, for our family's sake, it was important that Peter keep working on our house. So I did hire work to build the windows, help pour the floor, help with the roof framing, then the stuccoing, making the Roman shades. We did the plumbing and the wiring. The total cost of this building with all of that is about $10,000. Something I would have done differently is I would have provided some way to attach things to the wall. I would have pounded in sections of 2x4 or run posts up and down the wall a little bit so that I could have something to attach shelves to. This way, since you can't just tie into the straw bales, I have to build either freestanding shelves or support them from floor to ceiling. And supporting them from floor to ceiling, I now realize, is not such a great idea because it actually makes one little tiny part of this building's post and beam. This shelf unit, these two supporting 2x4s are bearing on the ceiling joist and the floor. So that's what's sort of holding up the roof here, as opposed to the bales. And this part here, the bales have begun to settle a little bit, and that's why this crack has occurred, because that one is being held up and that one is settling a little bit. But it's not going to be a critical problem. It's just a slight annoyance. It's not, there's one crack I have to show people and say, oh well, I would do that differently next time around.
We had friends in Gila, New Mexico, Steve McDonald and Sue Mullen, who both had straw bale homes, and we were very impressed by them. And Carol had helped out on building Sue's. Mm-hmm. So we went to Motts' workshop and learned the techniques of building it. And my background is a mechanical engineer and designer, and so it was like I just was able to put together plans and everything for this. And we're looking at passive solar straw bale home. Half of it is a wood shop, and the other half is a living space, music studio, greenhouse. The design I decided on was a hybrid design, which is on the south side here. It's post and beam because of all the windows on this side, and because I wanted to do this clear story design with a loft inside, I decided I need some structural poles that went up high. So we used salvage telephone poles for that, and on the back side is Nebraska style. Basically, the back of this large shed roof rests directly on to the bales on the back, on a top plate on top of the bales. The structure is up, everything's dried in. The ceiling is not insulated yet. I haven't stuccoed the front of this portion yet. And this is where I built my drums. It's a very nice creative space because all the vaulted ceiling in here.
and it's very light with the clear story windows and the south windows here. A clear story design is basically a compound shed where you have two shed roofs that don't come together at a peak. They're slid down. And so with the shed roofs, you basically frame it using rafters. And here I use 2x10 rafters spaced at 2-foot increments, and they went from a beam up at the top and it goes straight down onto the top plate on the bales here. Eventually there'll be insulation up in the rafter space. I'll have 10 inches to work with of insulation, and I'm blowing in cellulose here. These are non-structural. These things, these cross members are strictly I'm building shelves and hanging things on. Since this is a shop space, I really wanted to do something like wood that was real available to nail nails in and pull it out and go through without having to go through plaster or stucco. So put these on. It also made a convenient place to put electrical outlets and stuff like that. But it doesn't have anything to do with the structure of the building. This is the load-bearing north wall here. This space I'm using as a music studio and a study place, and this is where I do my designs and drawing, everything. Got my drafting board set up. This is straight adobe plaster, just straight from the mud that I dug up, the dirt that I dug up outside here on another project. It's the clay subsoil, and mix that with sand and troweled it directly onto the walls. It's hard and it's solid, but it also absorbs. It's not like cement stucco, which would reflect much more than this. The same thing with the floor. This is a puddled adobe floor, and it's the same basic thing. It's an organic earth material that tends to just absorb more than reflect. One mistake I made up front was these rafters are coming in at an angle onto the top plate. The top plate's across the wall like this. The rafters are coming in. They ended up setting on the back edge of the top plate, and my intentions were to block this front part in between the front of the top plate and the rafters to even out that load, distribute the load evenly across the wall. Mm-hmm. Turned out to be a very important thing to do, and I should have done it sooner than I did. But what ended up happening was I left it too long, and the weight of the roof started pushing the top plate down at an angle like this, and ended up kind of bowing these walls out. This back wall, well, bowing it in to the inside here, to try to even out the load itself. It didn't seem like it was near failure or anything like that, but it ended up having too much of a bow here aesthetically than I wanted. So I ended up putting these 2x6 plates in here to pin them in at the base, and then push this wall back out and attach this up to the top plate. And that's basically, what these two boards here are for. Mm-hmm. is to get that wall straightened back out. Then I came through and blocked up in between the inside edge of the top plate and the rafters to distribute that load evenly. This is a good illustration of how you can bevel the windows in around a window, and it just gives a really organic, rounding out feel. Everything for the base here. This is a base for tile. I just stuck a board across here and leveled it out, everything, and then poured some mortar in here and squeezed it off to that board. Then I removed the board, and then brought my mud plaster up to that point. So now this will be just tile up here. I ended up leaving. I was gone one day, and the window was open, and a really driving rain came from the east, and it brought rain in here, and it ended up eroding my adobe wall here. So I'm going to need to patch this here. But with the adobe, it's real easy to patch. You just put a little more mud on there, and you can float it directly out into it. As opposed to cement stucco, it's harder to patch because you can't really float cement into cement nearly as well as you can adobe. All you have to do is just wet this down a little bit and re-trowel it on. So this will be no problem to patch. This one needs to be sharpened up and everything, but this is a hay saw for trimming off the bales, get it rounding off the corners and stuff. In here, we used a chainsaw and also used a hedge trimmer type. Well, it was like pruning shears kind of thing, where the it's just a hand-held clipper, and we just ran the staple, the fixed piece just up into the straw where we wanted it, and the other one just kept chopping it down like that, and that worked fine too. Something else that in a workshop that I was involved with in Texas, a guy came up with this great idea of using a electric carving knife. You could do a couple windows, then you had to wait for the knife to cool off a little bit. Worked out great.
Well, as we come up to the door, you may notice that it's a little bit short. When I went to the lumber yard and asked for a screen door 5 bales high, they looked at me rather strangely. So, needless to say, we built our own screen door because it had to be exactly 5 bales high. I might begin in the first by showing you my little truth door over here. This is in case you're from Missouri or someplace else that would like to really see. This I got over across the border in Agua Prieta. There's a wonderful little man over there that makes each of these tile one at a time in a press. They're not baked. These are water cured tile. But we got the dark color so that they could be used for bringing in the passive solar over here. You see we have a broad expanse of windows here which bring in the winter sun, and it collects the heat in the dark tile and then gives it back off in the evening and through the night. You'll see we've made a loft here and a sleeping loft up there that's used all the time. We do have a stove. If it's cold on a winter night, you might want to put a fire in it, or early in the morning, but the house doesn't get very cold. There's such good insulation. This we actually call the throne room for obvious reasons. There's our wonderful composting toilet. We're on no sewer. There's not connected to any chemical, any water, any heat, anything. But here you'll see the batteries. So we have a bank of batteries here operating from the solar panels on the roof, bringing in the direct current. Over here, you'll see we have the inverter here, which takes the direct current and turns it into alternating current. You notice as we came up to the house, there was a tall tower on top. And if we look up here, you'll see at the top there where the pads will go. Very much like a swamp cooler. This box over here, this painted white, is the other hot water tank that circulates with the one on the roof to circulate back and forth. I have always had the vision that I wanted to live in community, and I wanted to live lightly on the land, and I wanted to grow things, and I wanted to make a contribution to the world and not deplete it. I wanted to add to it. And I have founded a spiritual retreat and healing center here in southern Arizona. We have 13 acres here with the Baba Kamari River running through it. I was really inspired with building straw bale when I took an intensive course in permaculture some time ago. It's when the first time I'd heard about building with straw bale. And I think I would have built everything on the place with straw bale if I'd known then what I know now. But now that I built the straw bale house, it's been such a delight, and it's so efficient and so just wonderful feeling to be inside it where we are right now. This house was built to be an educational tool, and it's served that way. I have groups that come out almost every Thursday evening for a tour of the straw bale house. I had to put them all coming on one day, otherwise all of my time was taken up with showing individual people through the house. This house is 930 square feet, which is plenty big. It is now serving as a home for 2 women. My daughter and my office manager both live in the Straw Bale house here now, and then it also serves as the office for Cielo and Tierra. So this house is built with a Nebraska style, and that means that the roof is bearing right on the bales of straw. The weight of the house is bearing right on the straw, and it's very, very sturdy. This house, I think this house will be here long after everything else on the property is long gone. We figured we have an insulating value here of R45 in our house, which keeps it. Right now we're sitting in a cool house. It may be out in the sun there. I would guess it's well over 100 degrees, but inside it's very comfortable and cool. We invited 22 of our friends out from Tucson, many of whom had never even seen a bale of straw, and we all got together and had a building party. We put up all 4 walls in one day. We did wait before we put the plaster on till there was any settling from the roof. We watched the settling, the compression of the bales of straw. And there was very little compression. We were surprised. We used a stucco that a crew of men came in and blew on with a big gun, and which made it penetrate the straw really well, and we could put it on thicker, and of course it was much faster. This house is entirely off the grid. It's entirely solar. Everything in it runs with father-son running. Father-son runs the show.
You mean the electricity that this camera is operating on?
Yes. That
is coming from batteries?
It is coming from the sun out there. There are always things that you would do differently. Mainly, I think, I might delete the cooling tower just because we weren't aware of the strength of how much insulation we really have from the straw. I think I'd try to get along without that expense. But it's there anyway for the educational purposes.
I really don't have much of a background as a builder. I've been raised on a farm all my life. I spent most of my life on the farm, and we've always had building projects, corn cribs and additions to barns. And I just enjoy working with my hands. We sold our interest in a nursery in northern Illinois. We had really no place to stay other than our trailer, and so we were forced essentially to build a house, and this looked like a good idea, and so we did it. I probably have another 6 months of finishing touches, but anyway, at least we're in. Well, we're in the inner courtyard right now, and the house was developed designed with a C shape involved around the central courtyard, and both wings have to be entered. You have to go out in the courtyard to enter. So one wing is now my woodworking shop, and the other wing is a guest room. But there'll be a fireplace in this corner, and then I forgot to mention that there'll be 2 more fireplaces, one in the master bedroom and one in the living room. And there'll be a bathtub in the bathroom, but right now it's just storage.
Beautiful, looks like an adobe.
Yeah, actually just the gray walls not painted look nice, but I think we will paint them that white. With putting the wall up itself it takes more time to put up the lath material on inside and outside your stucco wire. But actually putting the bales up, it's not a difficult procedure at all. Anyone can really do it. That's the real nice part about it. You don't need a lot of specialized equipment, and friends can help, and just needs a few extra hands. This front door is 2-inch thick pecan, and it probably weighs 250 pounds, maybe a little bit more. And I put 5 hinges on, which is probably a little bit of overkill, but I sure didn't want them coming off. It's about 2,400 square feet. Just yesterday we put these peeled alligator juniper poles up. They need to be finished on top, and they need to dry, and then we'll put a satin polyurethane on them. And this is where we hang our hats and coats. But as I said, I need to do some work on top and on the bottoms of them. But this is, I'm standing in the dining room. These alligator junipers, they grow above 6,000 feet elevation, and I got a permit for those up near a small piece of property we have in Mule Creek. And the Vigas are ponderosa pine. They came up from around, we cut those down in the forest near Reserve, New Mexico. And the Latias were up at even higher elevation up in the Gila National Forest, outside of Reserve as well. What I'm going to do is take the same sand material that we used to make the stucco and apply it to the sheetrock compound, a couple of coffee cans per 5-gallon bucket. You mix that up and apply it with the same circular motion that you put the this is called river sand, and it's a kind of a circular motion when they put it on. And I'll put this sheetrock sand combination with the same motion on the sheetrock, and it'll get I'll tape it, of course, but that'll give it a rougher texture.
All look the same.
Right. I think rooms will all be painted in an off-white. And as I said, the bedroom here is the only room that we have in which the walls, at least 2 of the walls, are painted.
Beautiful furniture.
Yeah, that twig furniture. I may have to, if I don't pass my boards, I may have to start making twig furniture again.
Did you make this bed too?
Yes, I made everything. The hope chest, there's the dining room table, everything. End tables, everything but the TV and the sofa.
Wow.
In our particular area, Fort Thomas, we have no building permits. I had to secure a permit for the septic system, but even then they were pressed for manpower, and they asked me to do my own percolation test. We had no problems getting insurance. They just asked us the value we wanted to put on the house, and that was it. Sent us our premium.
Mm-hmm. Did you tell them it was built of straw?
No.
Did they look at it? Did you send them pictures? Did you just describe?
No, and I'm surprised he never came out to take a look at it. It's a small town. I mean, everyone knows.
It made sense to me. It made a lot of sense to me, because coming from Italy, where we don't build houses with wood, mainly because people consider it a fire hazard, and also because the houses in Europe have to be traditionally thick-walled, solid houses. I never could understand the concept of a frame house, particle board. It just didn't make sense to me. So I thought, if anything, it made more sense to me to build a house out of straw bales or hay bales than a frame. I was in such a lucky position, and I'm such a lucky position to have, to be able to buy a piece of property and be able to build a house, that I thought that I had the responsibility to do something with it that was responsible, different. The land was so beautiful, I didn't want it to have it ruined, bring in a lot of, I didn't want to use chemicals in the construction. And quite honestly, I couldn't afford adobe. I wanted a double adobe house. I couldn't do that, So I was just sitting here in the day, just like today. It was the fall. And I thought about mats, and I thought about the straw bale houses. And I said, there we go. And I went back home, and I traced them down, called them. And he said, forget it. They'll never give you a permit, because they haven't given permits out yet. And we've been trying for a while, And I said, well, I'll just try anyways, And so it started the whole thing that led eventually to the permit. The first official, well, there have been a lot of straw bale houses built before, but never officially with a permit in this country. But, where I am here, I could have built, like New Mexico is a big state, I could have built a house and not necessarily have to ask for a permit, because as you found out, finding this place is not easy, and you don't really have to ask for a permit. But I felt that wouldn't help anybody. One of the things that I wanted to do is, it seems to me that there's a problem in the state particularly with low-income housing. A lot of people cannot afford homes. Adobe has become, this rich man thing, very expensive. the family used to build their own adobe house, make their own adobe, but now everybody has a full-time job. They don't have time to build, you know, make the adobes, build a house. So they end up, you know, buying a trailer or you know, getting a quick frame house. And I wanted to do something that was prove, you know, or show that there's other ways. There's, you know, ways that you can do something beautiful, and it's great. It's beautiful. It's cheaper even than a frame house, you know, and it's environmentally sound. All of these things together, and a straw bale house that's what it is. So I started the process, which was very lengthy and very, you know, months and months and months. You know, one of the problems was finding people willing to be involved in it, you know. Architects were, or builders, they didn't want to touch it, you know. The biggest problem is that this makes sense, makes too much sense. So when we do something like that, it's so simple, it makes sense, it's better. How could that be possible? I got my straw from Colorado, from the same men that delivered the hay for the horses. It was a 3-string baled straw back then. Now straw is expensive. Back then it was $2.25 delivered from Colorado. Beautiful, I think, oat straw. And then we just started building foundation, post and beam, and roof first, and then put up the straw. So basically, you know, this is a post and beam house, and the straw acts as a insulation. You know, there's no load bearing on the walls at all. And but yes, Matt's came from Arizona. He was great, you know, and all these people showed up for when we were putting up the straw, and it was fun. And we had a barbecue, and then we just started plastering, and that pretty much was, the house was done. It was fast. I think it took us like 3.5 months from beginning to end. And the feeling of a house that is built with a natural, earthy material, I feel it, you know. To me it's important. I feel the difference. It feels, I feel protected. I feel safe, and I feel comfortable, loved, all those things, and I feel every time I look at a wall, it's beautiful. I hope that more people will take advantage of this and build their own houses, because the great thing about this is that you can build it yourself. It's really very easy. I mean, now that I've done it, I would do it again. I could do it, you know, much easier myself. I know what I'm doing. It's basically stacking bales. There is such a thing as a dream house that you can afford and build, you know. A straw bale house is the solution.
Magazine about Mats Meerman about 2 years ago, and so both the architect and my son were very interested in it. I wasn't really excited about it, but I said, well, you know, if it sounds like a good idea, maybe we can try it. So that was I decided to try it. We're using straw, so banks weren't interested, and well, then their response was that if you'll never get an appraiser to approve it. See, the banks always rely on their appraisers. Mm-hmm. So we went to Valley Bank, and Valley Bank didn't say no. A couple of the other banks rejected the thing out of hand, you know, but Valley Bank didn't say no right immediately. They said, well, I don't think it'll work, and you know, we'll run it by our appraisers and see what happens. So About 2 weeks later, the bank representative called me in New Jersey and said, well, we gave it the idea to the 4 appraisers who do work for us, and they all 4 turned it down. So I called my son and I said, I don't think we can build it with straw unless we can, then do it with cash. And so he says, let me see what I can do. So he calls the bank and he gets the names of their 4 appraisers. So my son calls the appraisers and starts talking to them. And he's sort of a pretty persuasive individual. So he found one of them that was interested, and said that he sounded like an intriguing idea, that if we could come up with the technology and safety factors and all these other engineering studies that would say that it was feasible, that he would do it. So as soon as the appraiser agreed to do it, the bank went along with that, and they sort of Valley Bank sort of got interested in straw building themselves, which was kind of interesting. And at first they didn't want to have anything to do with it, but then they began to think that, well, they might be pioneers themselves, and this might lead to more business for them, I think, But anyway, this lot being in Santa Cruz County, the only building code that we had to get approval from was the Santa Cruz County, which is sort of pretty much of a rural area. So we really didn't have any problem with that. Inspectors and so on probably felt that if Valley Bank would approve the mortgage that day, that would be good enough for them. That was sort of the impression that you get. We invited a lot of people who were interested in straw, and I didn't know there were so many people interested in straw. But we had 35 people out here the day of the straw bale raising, the wall raising. We did about 2/3 of it that weekend. This is a regular wood frame structure, and the straw bales are tied into the wood frame. The wood frame being on the inside and the straw bales on the outside. And they were 4 feet in length, 22 inches in width, and about 16 inches high. That was just an average, because there was quite a bit of variation in the bales. I would say plus or minus an inch or 2 in many cases. We have three coat stucco on the outside, and we got a Tucson company to do all the stucco work. They blew on 2 coats and they hand troweled the 3rd one. It was really a pioneer effort, because we didn't know what we were doing a lot of the times, and we had to make a lot of decisions as we went along, and we did a lot of adjusting. But most of them turned out all right.
Do you have any advice or suggestions or inspiration for anybody else who'd like to build a straw bale?
Yeah, go for it.
How long have you been a contractor?
Since 1973.
So how many houses have you built before?
Well, really from scratch to finish, I don't even have an idea. I don't remember how many. But we do a lot of concrete work and stucco work and brick work, all of those. Well, we do generally everything in construction.
How many straw bale houses have you ever built?
This is the first one.
And how did you first hear about straw bale construction?
Well, a lady came in here and said she was interested in building a house, and that's how come we started into this business of building the house out of straw bales.
And you got a permit from the state?
A permit is issued from the state.
And that was an experimental permit?
They approved at the CID. It's built with posts and beams. 10 by 10 inch posts, and the beams are 4 by 12s. That's rough cut lumber. And then, of course, the inside of the house on the living areas are furrowed out with 2 by 4s, and then the sheet rock. And on the outside, it's nothing but the straw, and then with stucco netting And then it's got 3 coats, the scratch coat, the brown coat, and the stucco coat. It's better than an inch thick. All the house in the garage is built with a straw on the exterior walls. And the walls, now that it's finished, is 22 inches thick. I made this frame with these little bales for people to come and look at them. Sometimes we don't have a video going, and this gives them an idea how the straw bales were laid. And that's a sample of the bales. And we have 1,512 square feet on the house, living area. We got 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, the kitchen, the living room, and the dining room. And then we'll come into the kitchen. This is the kitchen in here. This is 1 bedroom here. This is a pretty good size walk-in closet. We're coming here to the left. This is another bedroom with another walk-in closet. And then we have this bathroom in here. And I'm going to sell this house with an acre. Whoever buys it will have an acre on the of land with a house and a 260-foot depth well. And then I'm going to try to set it for 110,000 with an acre of land. The straw, what's going to burn is what's loose. Like these little pieces here, they're going to burn for sure, and we know it. But whenever it comes into where it's compressed, there's no air in it, it's going to choke. All of my sons and myself built the house.
How many sons do you have?
I have 9 sons.
And
5 girls.
5 girls, 9 sons?
9 sons and 5 girls.
Wow.
5 daughters.
So the whole thing was a family affair.
Right.
Do you have anything else to say about building with straw bales?
I like it.
About 2 years ago, we started thinking that we were living quite a ways out of town, and we started thinking about trying to move closer to town and building a house of our own. And right about that time, we, just through some friends, began to hear about straw bales as a way of building, and it seemed sort of a joke initially, and lots of comments about little pigs and so forth. But the more we looked into it, it began to make sense, both from an aesthetic standpoint, with giving thick walls and the kind of a lumpy look that we sort of associate with Santa Fe or Southwestern style, but also really high insulation values and some real economies in the cost of building. So we began to explore it seriously and found that we could actually do it in building this house. Come on in. This is kind of a foyer, what the architect called sort of a centering space. All the traffic in the house comes through this space eventually, and you might want to take a look at the nicho here that was designed by one of our builders, and our daughter came up with the idea for the little straw bale motif. The problems, of course, were, 1, would the state issue a building permit for that kind of a house, and 2, could we find financing and insurance for the house? As it happened, right about the time we were investigating building, the State Construction Industries Division had decided to issue some sort of experimental permits to a limited number of people just to get some experience and to see how straw bale construction worked. At the same time, they had created a task force to develop some, at least a beginning set of standards for construction techniques. We happened to be working with an architect who was on that task force, and we put in a request for one of the experimental permits. It happened that our request was granted, and then I found out that, in fact, there were a couple of banks in town, at least, who were willing to finance a straw bale house. I'm not sure they knew what they were getting into either, but they were willing to do it, and apparently at least a few insurance companies were willing to insure. So that cleared the way, and as far as I was concerned, based on what we learned, we thought it was an idea well worth pursuing. And you notice all the floors are poured concrete. We put color into the concrete after it had been poured when it was being finished, and then scored it and then filled the grooves with grout. So it looks like tile, but it was all poured as part of the original slab. The house took actually just about a year to build, largely because, well, it's a big house, as you can see, and we really wanted a lot of nice finishing work in the details. And admittedly, building with the straw bales, in many respects, our contractor kind of had to make it up as they went. They really did a great job in figuring out how to resolve a lot of problems that no one really could have foreseen at the outset, and just how to do a number of different things with straw bale walls. I mean, the house, again, it's not just four walls and a roof. It's a fairly complex and sophisticated structure, and so it really called upon the contractor to use some real ingenuity in solving some of the problems that this posed, but it all worked out. The famous Bale whacker that the builders just made up and constructed, but they actually used to pound the bales into place, and sometimes they would just stick out. And it is a testament to the flexibility of straw bale construction. You can just whack the things and smooth out your surface without doing any damage to the bales themselves. Mm-hmm. One of our favorite artifacts of the construction process. The straw walls are essentially all of the exterior walls, primarily on the east, north, and west sides of the house, and where you see the chimney there, that's cinder block, because the fireplaces are located there, and the fire code required that to be block, and as well the walls on the second floor are all frame. The state construction industries division was not, they weren't sure about letting you build a second floor with straw bale. They weren't sure about I mean, even though the straw bales in this house are not load bearing, it's got a post and beam construction that actually bears the load of the ceiling of the roof and the second floor. They still put limits on how high you could build with the straw bale walls. Mm-hmm. This is our son's room, Justin. He's just home from college and really isn't into cleaning his room up, so we'll pass that room for now. Katie's room is the one with the Tron wall. This room we call the sunroom, for obvious reasons. My favorite room in the house. The house is 3,800 square feet. And the contract price was a little under $100 a square foot. Mm-hmm. We realized as the house was being built that once it was all covered over and looked like an ordinary house, nobody would believe it was built out of straw, so we took one of these old Mexican shutters and adapted it to show the place's pedigree. You know, there are a few little things in the design of the house that we might do differently if we had to do it over, but all in all, we're pretty tickled with the result.
The recent revival in straw bale construction has been mainly focused here in the Southwest, and people often ask whether straw bale construction is only appropriate in arid regions. Our experience suggests that this is certainly not true. We have located straw bale structures in Alabama, one of them dating from 1936. We recently visited a straw bale structure built in 1979 north of Seattle in an area that has 85 inches a year of rainfall. There are certainly straw bale structures in areas that are very cold and get lots of snow. We know of a church built in 1952, a load-bearing straw bale church, built in northern Alberta. So it appears that the technique is applicable through a wide range of climates. The full potential of straw bales as a renewable construction material will never be realized unless we can expand its use beyond owner builders and use by custom builders. Recent interest shown by architects and builders who have attended straw bale workshops makes us hopeful that their participation will enable us to get straw bale construction into the mainstream, where it really can make a difference in terms of our use of planetary resources.